Welcome to Make EdTech 100. I'm Lindy Hawk, educator, K-12 EdTech advisor, and your host. This is a podcast where we keep it real about what actually works in classrooms. No hype, no overwhelm, just practical strategies, honest stories, and tools that make a real difference for teachers and students. So come along with me on a journey to make EdTech 100. Today's episode will be number 7 in the screen time series that I'm doing. We are talking game-based learning, and what I love about this episode is game-based learning can be completely no-tech, low-tech, or high-tech. Game-based learning can be a great screen or tech-free learning experience, but technology can also really add to game-based learning experiences. It's a perfect example of why teachers need access to one device per student so that they can make instructional decisions as needed. In a kindergarten class, we might want a completely no-tech game-based learning experience, but with my 6th graders, I would love the opportunity to use Minecraft Education to engage them in a lesson on ratios, because Minecraft blocks are a great way to teach ratios and fractions. In addition to the great takeaways about game-based learning from my guests in this episode, I hope you have this idea in the back of your mind as you listen today. Today we are talking all things game-based learning, and with not one, but 2 guests, and I think, I'm almost positive, this is the very first episode of Make EdTech 100 where I've had not one, but 2 guests. Our first guest is Jacquie Gardy. She is a consultant and editor at Gardy Learning Design Studio. And then we have Dan Ryder, who is the Director of Design and Innovation at Community Regional Charter School. Welcome, Jacquie and Dan. So I have to say, we were talking before we started hitting recording. Dan works at a school, and we have very authentic school experiences happening today. If you're not watching the podcast, for one, he's in the basement, because that's where the tech people get shoved. Anybody that knows that works in a school, the tech people get shoved in like the basement or like the corner or something like that.
This is true.
Yeah, so he's
This is
in
true.
the basement of his school.
But to be fair, I have like a layer above ground as well. I have multiple layers.
You have
So
multiple layers in the
us
school.
tech folk, there's only 3 of us in the whole district, and so we've got this like basement storage area and where we go to like make our sinister machinations. But then I have this space called the Ravenworks, like above ground, and in the Ravenworks is our big digital design studio space with and digital and physical fabrication. So that's where we have like our industrial lasers and our 3D printers and our wide format printing and all of our, and then that's also where I combine makerspace stuff with social work, and we do work to kind of help anyone who comes through the door with whatever problem that they're having. So I do have a space where I can see sunlight. I am allowed one.
You are allowed a little bit of sunlight as the tech person.
Every day I get like a couple hours. They let me come up out of the deep dank dark.
Out of your lair, emerge from your lair.
Yep.
Awesome. Anything else the audience should know about you, Dan?
I've been doing the old education thing for like pushing 30 years.
Wow.
Like we're getting close. And yeah, I spent most of my life as a ELA teacher, and then got nipped with the design thinking bug, and all of a sudden it completely changed everything, including the opportunity to meet Jacquie and doing cool work with her in her most recent professional life before the current one. So yeah, but that's what there is to know about me. I do a whole bunch of all sorts of things at CRCS. And
Jack of all trades.
master of absolutely zero.
People that don't work in schools don't realize how often when you work in a school, you just are the jack of all trades. You just get pulled into duties as assigned, bullet, bullet,
Oh,
bullet, 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 bullet,
well,
bullet.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
And
like
some
it's
admins
very
don't have
different
that.
than duties as
My
assigned in like the corporate world. Like a very different experience.
Yeah, I will do everything on a day-to-day basis. I could end up doing anything from bus duty to one-on-one to teaching a seminar to fixing a laptop to resetting passwords to calling families and checking in on a kid's well-being to like it's just
Wow.
we just do all the
All the
things.
things.
Sometimes I drive a bus.
Oh wow.
Technically not a bus, technically a van, but it looks like a bus.
Yep,
Yeah,
sounds about
like,
right.
and we
Yeah,
just all
right.
do all the things and somehow it works out.
Somehow it works. Very good. Jackie, what else do listeners need to know about you?
Like Dan, I have a lot of experience in education. I think I just counted it up. I'm close to 24 years total, but I've had a little different path. So I was an ESOL teacher, and then I did community college teaching, refugee ed. I taught abroad for a year in university English classes, whole bunch of this and that. And then I moved into program management and technical writing editing in the Department of State, the Office of English Language Programs, where I was a global programs officer, connecting teachers to teachers all over the world, primarily in the global south. And I also did a lot of writing and editing, including some of the great projects that Dan and I have done. One of them was, let's see, there's Panels and Perspectives, which was a comic book that we designed together, and then a card deck called Critical Creativity in Action. And now in my new life, it's been about a year, and I started my own business as a consultant and editor. So I edit materials. I edit mostly education leadership textbooks, and my goal is to enhance people's voices so they get their voice out and their ideas out to a wider audience. And I do that in a variety of different ways. And like Dan, I'm also very into design thinking. I've created my own kind of design thinking process to get you from like a post-it note idea to like a book proposal within about 6 weeks. And we follow the arc of design thinking with 6 stages. And that's kind of everything in a nutshell. It's an exciting time, but it's like very busy. And I'm my own boss for the first time ever, and that's a whole new change. And then, like other duties as assigned, there are a lot of them running your own business. So I'm learning all of
You
that.
literally
And
have to do all the other duties because they are all
yes,
assigned. Because it's
there's
just
Literally.
nobody to delegate to. Yes,
Story of my
nobody.
life. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I can delegate to like my dog, but he probably wouldn't help me much. So
somebody needs to
I'm
replace
all
the
alone.
soap in the restroom. What is happening?
So
Someone's
that's me in a nutshell. And along the way, during my State Department time, I got involved in the Federal Games Guild. So that kind of brings us to our conversation here. The Federal Games Guild is focused on serious games that are created by the government and contractors of the government. And serious games is like a subset of gaming in general, focused on like the name serious games, but focused on, I guess, project oriented games that are educational in value of some sort. With that, my first actual assignment in that job was to help do all the QA and all the language and all the like reviews of a video game that was called Trace Effects, and it was for English language learners. So that's how I got pulled into that world, and I've been pretty active in Federal Games Guild, and then more so through South by Southwest EDU. So I've kind of kept that thread going.
Before we go any further, I said we're talking game-based learning today. There are a ton of misconceptions on the difference between game-based learning and gamification. Would you give us a definition of each and, what are misconceptions that you want to clear up?
I will talk for like ever about this because it's a
Yeah.
huge like thing for me. Like like can't we get this right?
Okay. So how I see it is game-based learning is where students learn through games and the game is the learning experience. Whereas gamification is like adding game elements like points and badges to non-game tasks. So the difference I see is that one is experiential and the other is like motivational scaffolding.
That's exactly what I was gonna say, much less eloquently and with a lot more words and weird tangents. But that's the heart of it. It's where's the focus? Is the focus on the game experience, the elements that actually truly drive a game in that learning experience, or is the focus on the most like superficial elements, points, numbers, values? Are you just trying to get learners into a game loop where all you're trying to do is get them to get more points or level up or do whatever those things are for a basic reward, right? Or are you using the concepts of journeys and quests? Are you using choices and consequences? Are you using the core fundamental aspects of gameplay and working that into the learning experience as well? See, much less eloquent, lots more words. Jackie's was much more succinct and clear, but I don't see that like gamification is some sort of a awful evil thing. Like it's because we're in an era where everything has to be good guys and bad guys, right? We can't just be like, well, sometimes gamification is good and sometimes game-based learning is good and it's all contextual and it all depends on the situation and that we make sure we have balance. Now, we have to first say that one is bad and one is good and one is better than, and what they serve two entirely different purposes, like Jackie just said. One is really around motivation, and the other is around experience and deeper learning, and that's the difference.
On that note, this podcast is all about getting practical with what actually happens in schools and classrooms. Can you give us an example or like a vision of what game based learning could actually look like or does look like in a real classroom?
I can give you one from today.
Okay, I
How's
love
that?
it.
Right? Here at CRCS, we do everything in interdisciplinary seminars. One of our seminars that's going on right now is a prepare for college life seminar. I forgot the actual name for it, but it's got something much more clever than prepare for college life. It's much better than that. But the final assessment, I worked with the facilitator, Amber Horn, who is amazing. I worked with her to come up with a final summative assessment that is a game where the learners have to develop a board game. What, not board game. Sorry, let me take that back. I deliberately did not say board game because I didn't want them to fall in the trap of Candyland Plus or Life Plus, right? And so they had to design a card game, a dice game, or a drafting game that demonstrates how to balance four different aspects of college life while also being successful. And that the gameplay has to actually inform the player of what it is like to experience that balance, the challenges of it, the nuances. So they had to make a bunch of different decisions to develop these games, and it was also inspired by really great work out of the University of Montana. Let's see, I'm trying to
Oh,
remember. I think it's University of Montana. I'm going to be super, super, super sad. I'll look it up. I'll make sure you can put it in your show notes.
the Grizz or
Um,
the Bobcats? The Grizz or the
See, I
Bobcats? Do
can't
you
remember
remember?
because I'm terrible.
Maroon or blue?
It's Trisha, and she's awesome. But she's done a lot of work with this at the collegiate level and making video games and board games that do this work. So now I've got my kids in middle school, high school doing the work to show what they know about the challenges of collegiate life. And the results have been everything from a very concrete looking kind of a take on Chutes and Ladders, which I was very concerned about, but they ended up creating such a dynamic sense of it. And the Chutes and Ladders is really there to represent the uncertainty and the unpredictability of school and college life, and that you just don't know, and sometimes something really crappy is going to happen to you and you don't know how far you're going to fall,
You
but there's
fall
all
down the
these things you
chute.
do have
Love it.
control over, right, to make it less likely, but you could still end up falling down a chute, right? So that was one that was way more concrete. And then another learner came up with a card game where basically you lay out the cards in this normal 52 deck of cards, right? And then they're in a particular arrangement, and it's the system of matching and the likelihood in which you find these cards that come out allow you to unlock different parts of this arrangement to pull different cards at different times. And I'm not doing a great job explaining it, but what was really cool about it at the heart of it was very abstract. And then he explained you have to make these decisions about which areas are you going to unlock and what is likely to give you the best results based on where you're at. And then he likened each suit of cards to a different aspect of college life. And it was like the thinking was just like head explode, go. And it all came out of him just sitting there and playing different versions of solitaire that he knew until he started mixing and matching to find something that like worked out the way that he wanted it to. And so those I see as truly game-based experiences in the classroom that anyone can do. I gave them a framework, I gave them the rubric. We use my 5E design process so they didn't have to just sit, go make a game. It was like there's structural pieces and there's scaffolding to help them get there. And there's a whole bunch of content work that was done ahead of time that Amber did with them. And we ended up with some really great prototypes.
That's great. I'm hearing the first example was a really good example of using game-based learning for an experiential learning experience. Like this is what real life is about. The second one sounded like a great example where you're really diving into critical thinking and problem solving. Just like in real life, you have different styles of games. My husband and I are big game players, board game players, and you have strategy games, you have cooperative games, you have, if you're not a gamer and you don't understand that the breadth of the different types of games is huge. So that was two great examples of just two completely different games that both have a different educational value to them. I'm curious, what age of learner were those examples with? I can't remember what you
The
said.
learners in that group ranged from 14 to 19.
Are there grade levels or subject areas that game-based learning works best or better in?
Nope, they're all equally fantastic and awesome. And
So
I
you
and
could
I
do
mean
this in
that without
kindergarten.
any glib instance. Like I don't mean that to be like they're all good. What are you talking about? No, I mean it's just the nature of games. And we dig into this when I'm working with learners in the game design. We dig into what were the games that you played when you were younger? Like what's the earliest game you can remember playing?
Mm,
Right? And we get back to like
mhm,
peekaboo. Like we try to like
mm,
really push to also show like you were playing more complex games than you realize. You just got told, "Oh, these are the games that you play and this is what a game is and this is what a game isn't." Except every time you were running outside and you guys were developing these complex rules about how to pretend to be a dog and how to pretend to be a cat and like who's cats and who's dogs and who gets which territory and all this kind of stuff. You were yes, it was play, but as soon as you start adding in these structural components to it, it becomes a game. And that's what kids don't realize until you kind of wake it up in them.
You said something about teaching students game design. So, do you also work with students to help them create games as a learning experience?
Oh, entirely. Like, and that's what that college readiness one essentially is.
Okay.
But I'll do seminars just in game design where they have to identify a piece of content that is meaningful. Sometimes we do games that matter, similar to what Jackie was talking about serious games. We'll identify issues in the community and they've got to design games that raise awareness of it, that either help suggest solutions or help generate solutions or show the complexities of solutions. For things like kids have designed games around the poverty cycle, the addiction cycle. Kids have designed games around being young and trying to maintain a job. Kids have designed games around healthy and unhealthy relationships. I had a learner one time, two learners that one time wanted to really dive into a very touchy subject with domestic violence and abuse.
Mm,
Really wanted to use gameplay not to trivialize it, but to show just how sinister that thinking is. And
mm.
and what an
I could see
abuser,
that.
how an abuser like tries to control the
Yeah, the
situation, right?
tactics that they use to control. Yeah,
And that was
that makes sense.
exactly it. And so the game was never intended to be played. It was intended to be like you don't play the game. You look at the rules, you look at the components, you look at all the elements of the game, but you don't play it because nothing will be the same as it. And this was a junior and a senior in high school in the woods of Maine were coming up with this idea.
Wow.
Like, and I was just sitting there going like, this is fantastic, and just encouraging and asking critical
Yeah.
questions and such. But like, they were the ones who came up with the idea to do something that challenging and then explained it to me what they really wanted the thinking to be.
So I'm
So
hearing that games can be a really great learning resource where you're learning through the game, but also an assessment strategy where students are showing what they learn by designing their own games.
absolutely. And that's what Jackie's some of the work that we've been doing and that Jacquie has done in her work with game design with like global audiences and with our critical creativity cards and how we kind of like we were saying earlier about gamified versus game-based learning. We kind of like intended and tried to do that very thing. So Jacquie, do you share about like our cards, well, and more about trace effects and the 4 million other games that you like were part of and making?
When you were talking, I was thinking about one of the other games that not my department made, but another department made called Cat Park. And it was a online game, like an app-based game. And you go in and you go through all the motions of social media as like, you post something and then you get attacked for it. And then the rumor gets spread and spread and spread about you. And then like, here you are. It's kind of a choose your own adventure, like how to get out of that situation. Then there's another one where you are the heckler and the consequences of all of that and where people get their sources. And it gives you all kinds of different situations after you start following that trail. Somebody will say, well, this is the way it really is. And they'll give a fake quote or they'll give a fake link or address or whatever. So the kids really have to critically think about how they're going to get out of this situation, how they could have prevented it in the first place, and all of that, and what they would have done differently after they're out of the experience, or what they might have done differently to see what could happen if they had chosen a different way to navigate that online situation. So I thought that was really brilliant. I think that's kind of a good example of being able to apply real world things to a classroom environment. And then like all along, especially with the Trace Effects game that we built, I'd say that it was pretty immersive for a language learning game because you're given the role of a main character that has to navigate through different situations in order to get the things that you want. I don't know if you have experience of living in a foreign country, but the very beginning, like you're kind of in a whiteout. Imagine like a total blizzard and you can't see anything. You can't read. You can hear, but you don't understand anything that people are saying. And you can identify things, but you might not know what they are, or people look completely different than you do. Like all kinds of things come up in that first few months of living abroad. And then you start navigating it and things get clearer. So the game is kind of modeled off of that experience where the first chapter is like of the game, there are 6 chapters. And during those chapters, like they navigate through different parts of the United States in the game. By the end of the chapter 6, they've gotten a lot of those skills that kind of races that fog that you might get into. So it kind of simulated like a real world thing, and it was very immersive, and it didn't ever name culture shock. It didn't ever name like any of those things, but it's definitely what the underlying theme of that was. And as for like assessment, we had a lot of different products that came with that, including notes and observation sheets that the teachers could use to observe the students, like students working side by side or with each other, because most of the time they didn't have their own computers. And most of the environments overseas are not one-to-one. So you might have 2 or 3 kids at a computer station at a time. So an easy assessment is how do you collaborate? How do you develop reasoning to do the different things in the game? And then at the end, how to reflect, and sort of like the idea of an exit ticket, but a more deeper experience of that.
I'm wondering if I am a teacher listening to this, I've never done any game based learning. Where do you recommend I start?
Just don't, because once you
Mm.
start doing it, you're just gonna want to do it all the time, and then you're gonna be like,
Addiction.
oh no, I have to have a varied assessment models. Oh no. My suggestion, and Jacquie, tell me if you disagree, and if you do, then our friendship is over, but that's fine. Not really, but it would be a really petty way to end a friendship. But what I recommend doing is the same thing that I kind of do with kids like early on, is take a game that kind of is terrible and make it better, right? Or a game that everybody knows and make it more interesting, more critical thinking based, give learners more agency in it. So the first assignment I typically give in my game design classes is redesigning Candyland, because
Mm.
Candyland isn't intended to teach. It isn't intended to be a good game, right? It's intended to teach color. It's intended to teach turn taking. It's intended to teach persistence. It's intended to teach like dealing with
Randomness, luck.
randomness, also
Yeah.
loss, right? Like navigating feelings, right? It's also intended to be kind of in terminal, but not nearly as bad as Shoots and Ladders, which might be the most like cruel game that was ever inflicted on parents. But what we do is it's what can you do in the space of one class period to take Candyland and make it better? And we go through like the design process through a quick rapid sprint through it of like ideating, just coming up with different things you could do. And oh, well, what if you had a character that you played when you went through it? Oh, what if you could hold a certain number of cards and chose when you wanted to play the card? What if you could give cards to other people and like force them to play the card? Like all sorts of things that we could do without having to create tons and tons of new content, but to just make the game that much better. Could you play in relay form? Could you play in this and this and this? What can you do to make this game that we know isn't great even better and more applicable to even wider ages? And then that lets you get into talking about the core elements of games and gameplay and why we go back to playing the games that we love, and how can I make Candyland more like a game that I really love playing? How can I make it more like a video game? How can I make it more like Minecraft? Oh my gosh, can you imagine Minecraft Candyland would be freaking
Mm.
awesome, right? It would be
Really
so
fun.
good, right? Like you can picture where it goes from there, right? And that's why we start with something like that.
As Dan said, start where you're comfortable first, and then also like come to our playground that we're about to talk about. Learn a little bit
Yes.
more, about game based learning, talk to other gaming type people. You'd be surprised how big the community is of gamers and game based educators. I've met so many throughout all the conferences that we go to, and they're out there and they're happy to share and they're happy to like give out resources or whatever. So there's a big pool of people to learn from, I would say. But yeah, find little ways to integrate it into your curriculum. Not have to be at scale. It can be little. It can be
Oh
first
yeah,
steps.
I think but you just made a good point, Jackie, about the start small. A lot of people will jump right into thinking, "Oh, this is a project. So now I have to get rid of a project so I can do this project, or I need to drop this so I can do this." And this is another one of those places where if you think more about game-based learning and less about gamification, you're not thinking about like how can I make something competitive? How can I make something with points? How many points should you get? How do you lose points? How do you gain points? Well, if instead you're like, what's the quest? What is the thing that we're going on a journey today, and a character is going to go through a journey that we're playing in this science class. Let's just for tomorrow, instead of just having my standard station rotation, they're going to go through a journey. And that starts leaning into the idea of making it a game. Hey, everybody, here's your character sheet you're starting with. You've got to add in information to your character as you go around through all these stations that I was going to have you go through anyway. But now we're going to add this like narrative to it where it's this person who's gaining these skills and knowledge to do a certain thing by the end, right? So it may be you're becoming a scientist, or it could be completely more whimsical. And it's like you've got a secret agent from the planet Clip 2, and everyone on Clip 2 is desperate to get a good haircut because nobody there knows how to cut hair. So here you're going to go through the scientific method and learn how to cut hair and how it all works. I know I'm making stuff up, obviously. Didn't put a lot of thought into that. But the whole idea is start with something small and use it as a formative assessment. Use these elements of gameplay to design meeples, make characters, come up with a way to have choices and consequences. Voice and choice in the classroom is essentially adding a game element to the learning experience, right? Everything has positives and negatives, and you have to weigh those choices. That's all can be considered part of making a game, especially if you start stretching out into the different aspects of your learning space.
You've given a lot of great examples of when to use game based learning. Are there times in a classroom, a teaching environment, a learning environment when you should not use game based learning?
When it stresses you out, really, like if it's if you're doing it because you feel like you're supposed to do it, that's the best reason not to do it, right? Like, and that's true for every form of assessment. Some of us are locked in. There's things that we don't have any agency over. We're just like, all right, we have to do this because the district says we have to do it, or we have to do it because the state says we have to do it, and we don't get a lot of say, right? But where I find in my experience, especially here at CRCS, when people come to me like a month into a seminar and they're so frustrated, and I'm like, so what's going on? And like, well, I thought we were supposed to do things around blah 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 blah. I'm like, wait, how did that come to pass? It was like it was a suggestion made in a staff meeting as an idea, and it got kind of turned into an
A
edict,
mandate.
a
Yeah.
mandate that was not
Yeah.
intended to be one, but just got taken as that for
You have to
because
do
we're
this.
human and we don't know how like things happen. But it's like, no, if it's not for you, don't do it. But if you're not doing it because you think it's too hard, but oh, it would be so cool if you're saying it would be so cool if, then there's ways to try it. And that's what we
Yeah.
kind of like the card deck that we made, we gamified. Like, and that's a case where we really did lean more towards gamification initially, where we gave our activities point values, but then we got it into more like game-based learning as we came up with different structures and formats to use all these little creative expression exercises that we came up with to help deepen content learning. And then you really can play a game experience. They can be a story development. They can be guiding a character through a journey, or collectively working towards a common goal if it's more of a cooperative. Like, it can be more like Pandemic and less like Catan. It can be, or it can be more like Blackjack and less like Rummy. It all depends on how you want to use these things.
Yeah, I like that. Well, like I was saying, there's so many different types of games. I didn't mention video games. I didn't mention deck building games. Pick a type of game that you enjoy playing and run with that. And there's so many gamers in the education world, and I think it's because gaming is such a learning experience that so many teachers and educators are gamers. So I love that advice to just go ask for help. Pick a game that you enjoy playing, no matter how simple or how complicated it is. And yeah, see if you can integrate it into your classroom somehow. That's great advice. And don't feel like you have to do it. It should be
Yeah.
Oh,
learning
yeah.
should be fun. Yeah.
I know, it's such a novel concept.
Yeah.
Such a novel concept. Learning should be fun.
Well, even things that you might think are kind of silly on the side, like the app Duolingo for language learning, I'm having more and more respect for it as I continue to use it. Not to brag, but I am on day
Oh
1382
my God, you should
on
brag
my
on that.
streak.
Good for you.
And I'm at a
Jackie and
high,
Chin Needles are out there just slinging
yep,
duos and lingos.
I'm up to like a high level B1, and that doesn't mean anything. It's just a piece of paper, and it's a score. But when I got to use my French, French is the language I'm working on. When I got to use it in real life, I was in the back of a car. My uncle was driving, and my mom was in the front seat, and they were going back and forth and having this whole conversation about where we should go first and what we should eat and what we should do. And this is in France, and I got to the point where I could understand everything they were saying, and I wasn't actually able to respond to them in French. I'm not quite there to that reciprocal language skill, but I understood enough to respond to them in English and to fight back on the things I didn't approve of what they were saying. So, and that all came from the constant repetition through Duolingo and how they, add new vocabulary, but also keep it going, keeping it interesting, and gives you different life skills along the way. So I was really surprised by how much functional language I had that I had just absorbed through this game. So, like, I think, some things that on the surface kind of seem like, oh, that's just an app, or oh, that's just a gimmick to make money. Like, actually, I think that some of them are actually legit and they're worth not dismissing.
We said at the beginning, this is a very practical experience because you're in a school, you're in the basement. You have to go, practical teaching moment here, school moment here. You have to go cover
I
for
do. I have
something.
to go. I do have to go cover. I've got a colleague who needs to go, and it's the last week of school. There are field trips everywhere. There are humans all over everywhere. There's graduation on Friday, and we're running thin client here, to borrow from super nerdy computer people from the 90s. But yeah, we're doing the best. So, but this has been fantastic. I'm so glad I got to come and talk, and that you let Jackie and I like be like two guests at the same time.
Yeah.
And
First
we're so
ones.
excited. We're so excited about the playground coming up. And there was one little piece that I wanted to share that Jackie inspired me by, like when she was talking about riding in the back of the car with her uncle in France and whatever. You can start seeing how that becomes like a game unto itself. And one of
Mm.
the coolest things in video games right now is this kind of renaissance that point and click story games are having, where they're slower games, they're cozy games sometimes they call them, but like that can be a very harried experience, but could also be a ride through a countryside, and how that becomes like, oh, the challenge of, did I give them the right directions? Oh, where did this take us? Where did it take us instead? How can I manage that through? And kids have a love of those. And the other thing that kids love right now that I'd say lean into are these like weird, like not augmented reality, alternative reality games, these ARGs, and things that have been inspired by like not just Five Nights at Freddy's, but these games that are even lower tech, where they're old 90s graphics and they're ugly and they look weird, and
Like
but you're
Minecraft.
flipping through stories and like Minecraft, but even these ones that are like, it's really like a series of narratives, and you're unpacking
Mm.
things and you're unlocking codes, and there's all sorts of decoding happening and figuring out these puzzles that are point like Mist, but done through this like manga anime inspired influenced street art slash the junk around my house things. They're so cool, they're so interesting, and kids love making them, and they're a very light lift to have kids make them using things like Canva and Google Slides and like all these tools that we have available to us digitally to make these video games. And some of the coolest things I've seen kids make in the last couple of years were video games made in Keynote. And they're just clicks that take you to different places within the same Keynote. And it's just a remarkable what kids with a little imagination and just a little freedom, some safe boundaries, creative constraints can do.
Just thinking about that too in terms of like RPGs, and particularly thinking of like Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering and Pokemon, those kind of things. They all require a lot of reading skill and a specific type of reading skill. So this definitely enhances a learner's ability to even comprehend things. And let's think of the transferable skill on a Pokemon card. There's a lot of information packed in that little tiny card, but there's also behind the scenes, what does that emulate in real life? It emulates reading instruction manuals. It emulates technical skills to be able to read and decipher and pick out the things that you need to know without reading all the other stuff. And that's a life skill, you know? And even like writing the instructions, sometimes you're playing a game and you're like, these instructions are terrible. I don't understand how to play this. There's your teaching moment. Rewrite it so that people do understand how to play this. Or what could you simplify so that this is more understood? So you can use games for other different types of teaching skills, you know, other types of skills that you're teaching as well.
I'm going to run.
Okay, yes, Dan, you hop off.
Jackie's
Thank
going to
you so
Thank
stay
you.
much.
with and answer even more questions. Thank you, Lindy. So nice to connect with you here
Yes.
in this space in your show. Thank you so much for having us. I'm going to
Yes,
go
thank
make sure
you.
kids get onto buses and
Okay,
get
good
home to their
luck.
families safely today.
Thanks, Dan.
Can't say what tomorrow will be, but
Stay with us, though. Jackie and I are going to keep talking, and we have more important things to discuss. But most important is, you've mentioned it a few times, the ISTE Playground.
Yeah.
So, coming up, the ISTE conference is in 2 weeks in Orlando, Florida. If you're
Boy, yes, it
attending,
is.
yes, I know, I know. End of June, by the way, in Orlando. It's going to
Mhm.
be a super fun, sweaty time for all. Sweaty, humid
Sweaty
time.
is the right thing.
You and Dan are both leading a playground called Tabletop Thinking and Learning, a game-based ISTE playground. First of all, if you have never been to ISTE and experienced a playground, what is an ISTE playground?
I see ASD playgrounds as hands-on drop-in learning environments with stations and facilitators. And if you're a first-time presenter at ISTE, they are a great way to break into the presentation circle because you do get presentation credit. You do get to be a presenter in the program book, and that matters. far, that matters more than you think, because it does help you build your professional career and gives you credibility that you wouldn't have otherwise. And a lot of playgrounds are very willing to accept lots of presenters, because as an organizer, we have like an allowance of presenters we're allowed to accept, but it's a pretty decent amount. And they're a lot more flexible than putting in a regular proposal too. So like, make friends with your ISTE playground coordinators and propose your own too. They're a lot of fun to run and build and all that. And why they matter is because they're low pressure and they're high creativity. So you can go and you can experiment, you can wander through the playground, you can like see what other people are doing. You can even walk in midstream of someone talking and demonstrating. It's all fine. Or if it's boring and you don't like it, it's fine to leave. Like there's not really a lot of rules attached to it. So playgrounds are just pretty cool, I think, overall. I mean, for me, it's one of the most valuable things I do when I go to ISTE is check out all the different types of playgrounds, especially in like pedagogical areas that I'm not as familiar with, because I can get a lot of information right away. So like, for example, a few years ago when VR, this was longer than a few years ago, but when VR started coming onto the scene, especially like with the Quest headsets, in the virtual reality playground, there was a whole bunch of demonstrations of the VR and how you could use those in school settings and different apps that are really good for school, for learning and for kids. And so I went to that and I learned a whole lot in just a very short amount of time. And I could have watched, 6 videos on YouTube. I could have read 3 articles, but getting that all in about 15 minutes, like really helped me get a little bit more up to date. I love playgrounds. This is going to be my 4th time running a playground with Dan. Dan and I have run 4 playgrounds now.
This playground is focused on tabletop gaming in particular. Tell us, what does that mean and why did you choose that particular focus for the playground?
We wanted to hit that, what we were talking about earlier, like that base level accessibility for teachers to put different techniques into their teaching and part of their teaching toolkit. So with tabletop gaming, they're quite accessible. It's low tech most of the time. They're low cost and high engagement. You can make your own board games. You can make your own tabletop games. You can have your students make them for different types of assignments. So they're very low lift in a lot of different ways. And they're also easy to adapt to any grade or subject. So you see a really great game or you see a really great tabletop gaming demonstration, but it's about science or ecosystems or climate or whatever, but you teach English. You can actually go to that, watch the demonstration and be like, okay, actually that would fit really well in my Shakespeare unit or something. They're very transferable in lots of different ways.
Who is the playground for? Teachers, curriculum directors, librarians, principals, superintendents, all the above.
I know all the above. Anyone that's interested, teachers, librarians, coaches, curriculum directors, tech integrators of any sort, your casual layperson, even like early learning teachers. I think that this particular playground kind of works for, pre-K all the way up to like a university level. You could find something for any one of those settings.
This playground is Wednesday morning, July 1st of the ISTE conference in Orlando at the Orange County Convention Center. I will be there. I am going to have a table. I'm going to be sharing how to vibe code game-based learning experiences. So I'm super excited about that because I keep saying, like 3 episodes now, I've said I need to do a podcast episode just on vibe coding because it is so empowering. So if you're listening to this episode going, oh man, I don't know, I don't have any board games or I don't have the skills to make a slide deck like Dan was describing of clicks. I'm telling you, through just some simple prompts now, you can create the most amazing interactive experiences for your students. So that is what I will be sharing. I heard that the playgrounds are right outside of the main stage at ISTE.
Yep.
So it sounds like you can't miss us Wednesday morning. Me, Jackie, Dan will all be there.
It's going to be a great time. We are so excited. We've got a huge, powerful slate of presenters this time of all different types of education and consulting and founding of cool learning-based companies, like just all kinds of things, people that have tremendous skills in the space. And I'm extra excited about yours because I don't really know what vibe coding is. So I'll take my own advice and learn a little bit about it in a little 15-minute spurt when I'm managing and working with Dan on getting all the things together during the playground. So we're on our feet a lot during these playgrounds.
you need to take yourself a 5-10 minute break, come over to my table. We'll do a little vibe coding lesson. It'll be
I'd
fun.
love to do that because I keep hearing about it, but if you ask me for a definition, I would not be able to provide one or even give an example. So,
It's basically just instead of having to write code and know coding language and actually write it out or even do like block-based coding, you're using AI to code. So you're giving it a natural language prompt and you're describing what you want to build, and then the AI builds the code in the background. It's really cool. So I'm going to be using Canva AI for my playground table. It's really amazing because you'll put a prompt in there and then Canva
yeah.
actually lets you watch the code be built, and it just starts spitting out code and like super fast, like more code that it would take me weeks to write, the amount of code it writes, in like a minute. So, and then bam, you have this amazing website created, and then you can keep prompting it to make edits and stuff. So yeah, that's really all that vibe coding is. It's text to code generation, pretty much. Is
Yeah.
fits super well with game-based learning and creating game-based learning experiences, virtual game-based learning experiences, of course. Or, I mean, honestly though, creating virtual game-based learning experiences, but you could also vibe code elements for tabletop physical
Mhm.
games as well. If you want a really cool card design or something like that, you could vibe code that. Tons of opportunities there. I loved how you said too, you said something about pre-K and kindergarten, and it made me think there's such a focus in the preschool, kindergarten, early elementary, early learning
Yeah.
area on play-based learning. And we keep saying,
Yeah.
oh, kids need to play more, they need to play more. It's games, people. It's games. Games is playing.
Yeah.
So, yes, you can do this with preschoolers. You can do this with kindergartners. I should mention my experience with game-based learning. I taught personal finance and I did a ton game-based learning and personal finance. And actually, I did curriculum development with personal finance curriculum. So I helped develop the curriculum for the personal finance. And then I actually got to teach that curriculum, which was really cool. And we had tons, like we used the game Life a lot. I mean, so many
It's,
game-based learning simulations. Well, the example that Dan was giving at the beginning of today of like the chutes and ladders idea of,
yeah.
sometimes you can do your best in life and just things happen. So we'd have games where, like they rolled a dice, and if they rolled a certain number, then their hot water heater went out and they'd have to pay $1,000 to replace it, or, things like that. So it just fit
Oh,
game-based.
yeah, that game is a little too accurate.
Yeah, absolutely.
I played it when I was a little kid, with my family, and I always thought it was actually a game, but now I'm realizing that's the game of life.
It
That
is
stuff, all
literally
of
the
that
game of
stuff has
life.
happened. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. It's very, very accurate. Yeah, we use life a lot. Had a lot of different just simulations and things. When I started teaching in the mid 2000s, that was right when creating Jeopardy games in PowerPoint was like
Yeah.
the thing. And I
Yep.
remember spending so much time creating these Jeopardy games in
Me
PowerPoint.
too.
And
Yes.
and then Dan was just giving that example of, having students do the same thing. So if you're listening to
Mhm.
this and you're a teacher and you remember those days of spending tons of time creating Jeopardy games in PowerPoint, you can now you could do that via vibe coding in a matter of minutes, literally, just to like give you an idea of how much the technology has advanced. So yeah, there you go. It's a little bit of my game. Oh, and I also am a big Minecraft education person. That's
So
my other big game-based
very
learning
cool.
stuff that I do. What would you tell a skeptical educator listening who just still thinks that maybe this idea of games in school sounds like fluff and fun and no learning value?
I mean, I would say if you're that skeptical, make sure you look into serious games. Just Google serious games and a bunch will pop up and you'll see like what the kind of impacts are for the learning based games. There is a difference between like the ones that you can buy at a game store or the ones that you can download online and like the serious games that are through educational institutions of whatnot. So, sure. I mean, they are solidly learning materials if you let them be solid learning materials. And structured play really builds a lot of cognitive skills. So, like my Duolingo example, a lot of learning kind of happens behind the scenes. It kind of happens in the back of the brain. So, if you're actively involved in something, you might be picking up, your kids might be picking up a lot more than you might think. And there's a lot of evidence that and research that supports engagement and retention in learning, and games are a great way to do that. So I would say try it out.
What about the teacher who has tried it? They tried doing game-based learning activity and it didn't go well. Maybe it was chaos. They vowed they'd never do it again. What would you say to them?
We've been there.
We've all
I'd
been
say,
there.
yeah. I mean, I'd say try it again. Try it with a different class. Try it with a smaller class. Try it with a bigger class. Like, try it with your own kids before, like your own personal kids, before you try it with the classroom. Experiment, because sometimes just doing it once or twice, it might not work, but maybe the third time will. So keep going at it. Keep trying.
Agreed. I wouldn't use one bad experience to just totally say game-based learning isn't for me. We've all
Yeah.
been there. Things don't go as you planned as an educator. Try it again.
Yeah.
Try a different game, tweak it a little bit. Yeah, learn from the experience and give it another go. I agree.
Yeah.
Don't totally throw it out the window.
Right.
There is also at ISTE conference a games night, one of the
Yes.
nights. Tell me about that.
Well, I wish Dan was still here because he's the one that's co-leading that event.
Okay.
It's usually held at a hotel, and I'm not sure which one because I haven't been paying attention. But I know it's Sunday night. It's free. There's usually food and beverages of the non-alcoholic sort that flow all night, and there's oftentimes like a game store vendor that provides games for people to use, and it's kind of drop in drop out, and you can pull out a board game and just start playing with anybody. You can go by yourself. It's a great activity actually to go by yourself if you don't know anyone, because games are a great way to meet people. Just pull up a seat and say, hey, can I play with you, or can I learn what you're doing, or anything like that. And most of the time, if there's space in the game, people let you in, and then you might even walk out. It's Sunday night, the first night of ISTE, you might even walk out with a new crew of people to hang out with the whole week. You just don't know. So I think it's a great thing. And I think it's all evening. I think it's like from 6 to 11. We'll have to get Dan's information about that, but
Okay.
it's going to be awesome.
I'll put some details in the show notes about the games night. It's definitely Sunday night, where it is, what the times are. We'll also put some details about the tabletop playground in there as well. How can listeners connect with you, Jacquie?
For me, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to go. Or if not, on my website, there's a contact me button, and click that and you can find me that way. My website is JacquieGardy.com. And with Dan, he is generally Dan Ryder 207 at whatever it is. So you can find him that way. Try it on, maybe not Twitter, but try it on Blue Sky, try it on LinkedIn. You can find him there.
His LinkedIn is Dan Ryder, RYDER 207. So, yes, we will put that.
I got it, the 207s.
Yeah,
Yes.
good job. I'm guessing that's like a Maine thing. Is that like the area code of Maine? 207?
It might be the only one. I don't know.
We're going to talk about him when he's not on here. Yes, I was right. I knew it because Maine and Montana are so alike. Montana also we have one area code, which is 406. Maine has one area code, which is 207. So there you go. I knew it. Like Maine and Montana people, we're so much alike. I was like, that 207 has got to be Maine's area code. So there we go. We all learned something
Nice.
new. So yeah, if you ever hear Montana referred to as the 406, it's because we only have one area code for the entire state. And so
it's a big state too, like in terms of geography,
fourth largest
right?
state, but we only have a little over 1 million people now. We used to be 1 million. We're a little over 1 million now. But somebody told me that we're like getting close to the point that we're going to have another area code, and that's going to really bug people.
I grew up in Colorado. It was very similar for the longest time. It was just 303 for most of the state, I think. And then now there's, I think, a lot because of the influx of people moving to Denver and surrounding areas.
We end every episode with a Make It Tech 100 moment. So this is like your last thing that you want to leave listeners with, a piece of advice, a summary from the episode. What would be your Make It Tech 100 moment, Jacquie?
Don't be afraid to use your creativity. Everyone has creativity in them. Find it. Use your agency to develop games and to develop game-based thinking experiences. And find the joy that's in every classroom, including your most problematic classroom. There's joy and to be had. So find it and find that spark because it's in you.
Love that. And have fun. Learning should be
Yes.
fun. Teaching should be fun.
Yes.
Very
Yes,
good.
absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Jackie, for coming on. And Dan as
Thank
well,
you.
even though he had to
Yeah.
do, typical school things and go cover for a colleague and leave early. Thanks
Yeah.
to Dan as well. Appreciate you both. Thanks for joining Make EdTech 100. I know educator time is valuable, and I'm honored you choose to spend yours with me. For more EdTech strategies you can use tomorrow and ways to bring me to your school or event, head to lindyhawk.com. If this episode resonated, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'm Lindy Hawk. Go forth and make EdTech 100.